The unstoppable Khamzat Chimaev. Is he the next champ? UFC 294 is now in the rearview mirror, and not only does Khamzat Chimaev remain undefeated, the rising star could be fighting for UFC gold next. But did the fighter who many believe is unstoppable look, well, unstoppable? Did Borz look as dominant against Kamaru Usman as he has with other fighters? And if not, why? Did injuries or the last-minute change in an opponent impact Chimaev? What may have impacted how things unfolded at UFC 294? And bottom line, will Chimaev make Strickland's reign as the UFC's middleweight champ a short one? And what's next for Usman, one of the greatest welterweights the game has ever seen? Well, before we get into all those fascinating questions, if you enjoy this video, please be sure to like it and to subscribe to our channel. Also, please be sure to watch this video all the way to the end and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Alrighty, with that bit of business out of the way, let's take a closer look at Chimaev's latest win and what could be next for Borz. Chimaev gets by the former welterweight champ. As it stands right now, just days out from UFC 294, Khamzat Chimaev remains undefeated as many people predicted he would be. Unless you've just stumbled into this ultimate cage fighting stuff, you know that Chimaev was initially supposed to fight fellow middleweight contender Paulo Costa. But due to a very nasty staph infection and multiple surgeries to his elbow, Costa had to drop out less than 2 weeks prior to UFC 294. The former welterweight champ Usman got the call from the UFC and agreed to move up in a weight to face one of the fastest rising, most discussed forces in the game, Mr. Chimaev. Now, due to the fact Usman was moving up a weight class to fight Borz, and because he was doing so with next to no training camp, the consensus was that Chimaev's loss column would continue to have a 0 after UFC 294. That said, some believed Chimaev could be in for a tough test on account of Usman's well-rounded game, which features top-tier wrestling as well as punishing striking. You can talk to Jorge Masvidal about that. Further, Usman has competed in many big fights to date, and as noted earlier, he is one of the greatest welterweights of all time. Well, once again, Chimaev demonstrated why he may very well be the most dangerous opening round fighter in the galaxy. As he did against the likes of Rhys McKee, Li Jingliang, and Kevin Holland, Chimaev quickly put his wrestling and fearsome top game to work against Usman. In doing so, Chimaev emphatically answered any questions as to whether his mountain wrestling would be able to put Usman on his back. A dude who, let's not forget, who was an NCAA Division II wrestling champ. So, as Chimaev pounded away at the former champ and hunted for chokes, it looked like we were going to be talking about yet another first-round victory for Borz. But to Usman's credit, the decorated fighter remained calm and tactically worked his way out of several precarious positions. Chimaev did outstrike Usman by a whopping 61-5 margin in the opening frame, but somewhat surprisingly, Usman looked relatively unscathed as he headed to his corner. In round 2, the smashing machine of Chimaev never really kicked into high gear until late in the frame, when he scored another takedown. Before that happened, Usman was able to land a few strikes on Chimaev, and he also teased a few level changes. As round 3 began, it was clear that Chimaev was treading in waters we haven't seen him navigate too often. The stormy waters of a competitive fight. Usman continued to score with shots and ended up outstriking Borz in the final round by a 41-34 margin. On account of how one-sided round 1 for Chimaev, it didn't really seem likely that we were about to see the judges give him his first defeat. But even the biggest Chimaev supporters have to admit they weren't sitting too comfortably as they waited to hear the judges' scores. 2 judges awarded the fight for Chimaev, but 1 judge had scored it a draw. Due to what transpired and because Usman looked strong in round 3, Chimaev's performance was immediately scrutinized online. Case in point, here's what Renato Moicano had to say. Kamaru Usman was a champ for a reason. 5 rounds. With a full camp, he beats Chimaev. Very impressive performance by Usman. #UFC 294. Fellow middleweight contender Marvin Vettori kept it short, but not sweet. Not impressed. Borz reveals injury impacted his performance. So, we've already covered how it was a competitive fight, but what are the key takeaways? Were some people underestimating Usman heading into the fight, even though he was moving up in a weight and was taking the fight on short notice? Or did the bout demonstrate that perhaps the hype train for Chimaev needs to slow down just a wee bit, and that his bandwagon should shed a few fans? Well, if you're a big MMA fan, you may have heard by now that after the fight, Chimaev revealed that he hurt his hand shortly into the contest. While talking to the media, an emotional Borz reported this. "I dominated the guy first round. In the first round, last minute, I think I broke my hand. It was hard to wrestle and keep him down, but I couldn't use my right hand, so we'll see what's happening. Maybe it's broken, maybe not. But you feel fucking pain. I don't know. I don't care. I won. My hand was up." Now, as this video is being produced, it hasn't been confirmed yet how serious Chimaev's reported hand injury is. But if he did break his hand that early into the fight, or just bruised it badly, it would definitely have impacted his performance. Not only in terms of his striking, but it would have hindered his wrestling and grappling capabilities, as he noted. Further, it's worth repeating that Chimaev did have a late change in opponent. While Usman isn't a hulking middleweight like Paulo Costa, stylistically, he is a different fighter than Costa and presents different challenges. In addition, some eyebrows were raised throughout MMA when Chimaev's manager confirmed that the fighter had emigrated from Sweden to the United Arab Emirates. Could that change have impacted the camp for Borz? All that said, you do have to wonder, as many are, how the fight would have gone if Usman had a full camp. Also, there were rumors during fight week that Usman had incurred a knee injury just a few days out from the bout. Before the fight, Usman vehemently denied that he had trashed his knee. But of course he would, right? And it remains to be seen if we hear more about that in the coming days and weeks. Will Chimaev crash Strickland's championship party? Now, leading up to UFC 294, Dana White said the winner of Chimaev-Usman would challenge Strickland next. But might the UFC reconsider, since Chimaev didn't run through Usman? Or could his hand injury force the UFC matchmakers to, say, tap Dricus du Plessis for a title shot? He is coming off a super impressive win over Robert Whittaker after all. One thing is certain, Strickland doesn't believe Chimaev deserves to fight for the title yet. While talking about Chimaev on UFC Fight Pass, the champ lit up the idea that Chimaev has earned a title shot. "The only thing I like about Chimaev is that he sells fights. For some reason, people fucking like him or don't like him. I don't know. To me, he's a fucking paycheck. He sells a lot of fights. People pay to watch, but he fucking hasn't earned it. He doesn't fucking deserve it, but here we are. Give it to him. He sells a lot of fights. I'll go fucking fight the man for 5 rounds. But no, he has not earned it. He doesn't fucking deserve it. And getting a decision with a welterweight off the couch does not fucking earning it." And what did Strickland think of Chimaev's win at UFC 294, or his abilities as a fighter? Here's the thing about Chimaev. The man can fucking fight. We all know that. He beat Usman to a decision. Usman, old, retired, but whatever. He still did it. But me and him are fucking different. Chimaev could be right here, and I will fight that man to the death, knowing I'm gonna die. That ain't fucking Chimaev, dude. So there you have it. If you're surprised by Strickland's comments, clearly you haven't been paying attention to the newly minted champ. But if the fight does happen, will Strickland become the first man to halt Chimaev's awe-inspiring undefeated run? The champ does have underrated wrestling, and we all know he's ridiculously tough, has cardio for days as well as top-tier boxing. So in other words, if Chimaev did smash Strickland, it would say a ton about his abilities as a fighter and what his fighting legacy could end up being. And what's next for Usman? And speaking of next fights, what's in the cards for Usman, who has dropped 3 straight, now albeit against Galaxy-class fighters in Chimaev and Leon Edwards? Given he fared pretty well against Chimaev, maybe it makes sense for him to stay at middleweight and face another contender. Or he could hold off on that decision until he sees who wins the December scrap between Edwards and Colby Covington. If Colby wins, then Usman's path towards another title shot will instantly become much, much shorter. After all, he's defeated Chaos not once, but twice. But what do you think? What's next for Chimaev or Usman? And what did you think of Borz's performance at UFC 294? Did it show that Chimaev isn't the all-powerful force a lot of people have made him out to be? Or given the situation and the apparent hand injury, should we not put too much stock into what transpired? Let us know in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and to subscribe to KO Central MMA.